Thank you for joining us on this very special episode of the Unique Perspective Show on YouTube. Today we're going to have an opportunity to speak to Yehuda Leib to hear what makes him tick. Today's episode is in memory of Raphy Strauss, Raphael, Yaakov, Yisroel, and Ron. Today's episode is sponsored by Paraflight EMS and the Torah Tavlin publications. Hello and welcome to the Unique Perspective Show. Today we're going to do something different. Instead of Yehuda Leib introducing someone new, someone interesting, someone with a very unique perspective, today, instead, we're going to interview Yehuda Leib Blander. As you all know, Yehuda Leib interviews someone new every week, someone interesting, someone with a unique challenge that brings a unique perspective to his life, someone who we can learn from. Today, we're going to interview Yehuda Leib and to find out what makes him tick. I'm your host, Yitzchak. So let's get started. Yehuda Leib, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you for that beautiful introduction. How are you?
Baruch Hashem, fine. So when you first contacted me about doing this interview, I was thinking to myself, where do I start? Where do I start? This man is a 30-year-old man who has lived a full life. And where do we begin to discuss Yehuda Leib? So let's ask Yehuda Leib himself. Where do we begin?
So where do you want to start?
Okay, I guess we can always start as young Yehuda Leib. What was that like? So let's introduce the world to Yehuda Leib Blander at age 10. Is that a good place to start?
So I'll take you a little further back. So I'm number 11 out of 11 in my family. And I have something called familial dysautonomia, which is a rare Jewish genetic disease. And it's very rare in the Ashkenazi world. And there's only a couple of hundred people with it. And for my family to have 10 other siblings without it, that's a unique thing in itself.
Okay, so how old are you when your parents realized that you had something unique about yourself?
So I was born a little early. I wasn't eating or drinking. I wasn't doing anything like that. So I was put into the NICU for a couple weeks. And then, Baruch Hashem, they brought me home. My birth was about 6 weeks late. And from there on, I still wasn't eating. I still wasn't drinking. Whatever I was doing, it was very, very, delayed. Whatever they saw or they wanted to see in their kid was delayed. So they went from doctor to doctor, from any type of doctor. And then they wound up in NYU by a certain neurologist. Her name was Dr. Felicia Axelrod. And she was the main doctor for all the kids that have familial dysautonomia, or also known as FD.
At that point, did they know that you had FD, or they just
they knew something was up. They didn't know what exactly it was. It was something neurological. It was basically neurological. It was in the brain, or whatever it is. So at that point, I was a year and a half. So it was about 16 months when they finally got the diagnosis that I had FD.
Was it a blood test? Was it a
so it was probably a lot of different tests that this doctor took, or the other doctors took, and didn't realize what it was until this doctor knew, because she was very familiar with the disease, that she actually diagnosed me.
Okay.
Happens to be, it was right before my brother's wedding in California. So there was a lot of things going on.
I'm just wondering. Hang on. Did your brother do Darius Sharm or something before he got engaged?
So there was Darius Sharm. However, it was not. FD was not being tested by Darius Sharm back in the 90s because it wasn't part of the panel just yet. No one really knew about FD to an extent that Darius Sharm put it on the panel. So no one really tested. But I guess when you have someone in the family that has FD, you're automatically a carrier for FD. So,
I mean, what statistically speaking, does every sibling have potentially the same genes as you, and are also carriers?
Yeah, I think most of my siblings are carriers. I do have 2 siblings that have kids with FD. I have my oldest brother that has 2 kids, a boy and a girl, and my sister has a boy with FD. Mm-hmm. So they got married before Darius Sharm tested, so they didn't really know that they were carriers for FD.
Right. Okay, so moving on. So how much of this do you remember? The testing, the
I don't remember any of it. I don't remember any of it because I was a baby.
Right.
But after a year and a half, then came all the hospitalizations and pneumonia after you can name it all. I think I was a little over 2.5 when or whatever it was. I don't know exactly how old, but they finally put a G-tube in me so that I can get nourishment and start gaining weight.
You mentioned off screen that you did a swallow study.
I've done many swallow studies.
I'm talking about your first one you did. How old were you then?
I don't remember how old I was. It must have been maybe 5, 6 years old. I don't know exactly how old I was. That was done in not NYU per se. That was done in a different hospital.
Okay, so now let's I guess move on.
Okay.
Now that we unfortunately are dealt with this problem, so how does this affect Yehuda Leib growing up? So let's talk about, let's say you want to discuss the beginning. So let's start, I guess, nursery and kindergarten. What was that?
So nursery and kindergarten, it was because I was hospitalized a lot. I didn't really get to go to nursery or kindergarten. So my parents actually left me back a grade because I was not well enough to go to school. So they left me back a grade. And then, but I was still very much delayed because I was still having lots of hospitalizations, surgeries, and everything that you can think of. So.
Okay, so now, did you have friends in your class from your area? Or did you hang out? Were you able to have a social life besides, the school life?
So when my parents decided to send me to school, so they applied me to a certain school, and the school.
I was wondering, are we talking about school names, or are we going to keep them off the table?
I could say the names. It was the Cheder.
Okay.
The Cheder accepted me. Unfortunately, the day before school started, the teacher that I was supposed to have quit, and the principal decided to say no because there was a new teacher coming in, and they didn't want to have another person in the classroom as a shadow to shadow me around. So they said no.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's talk about, let's say, let's start in the beginning of your, let's say, academic career. So let's say learning how to read, being part of the classroom.
So after not being accepted to the cheder, it took about a month for my parents to find a school for me to go to. They finally went over to Reb Manas Mendel's Zecher Zatzal, and my father told Reb Manas Mendel, I have a kid, I have a special needs kid. He was supposed to go to school, but he was not taken. So Reb Manas Mendel said, send him to school tomorrow, to us.
So where Manas Mendel is Yeshiva.
So Manas Mendel opened Yeshiva Brooklyn. He was the pioneer of Yeshiva Brooklyn, and he was the best person that happened to us because he gave me a chance to be in school, in a proper school setting, and yeah.
So this was, so hang on. So you went to Yeshiva Brooklyn starting what age? What grade?
So I started in, I want to say pre-1A, or right before pre-1A.
So kindergarten.
Kindergarten or pre-1A. Not exactly sure.
Did anyone in the area also go? Were you the only one in the area going to YOB, or you had other?
So there were a bunch of kids from my neighborhood that went to YOB because it was a normal, regular, normal yeshiva, and just had good teachers, good rebbeim, and yeah, it was just a solid yeshiva back in the day.
Very nice. Okay, so now now you're in pre-1A.
Right.
And what was that like? So you started with a new school, the first time in your life you're in an official academic environment. It's not, no free for all.
Right.
You can just go to mommy whenever you want. And now you're in class. So what is that like for someone? So you had a shadow, you mentioned.
I had a shadow, and so since I was hospitalized a lot more in elementary school in Yeshiva Brooklyn than the previous years growing up. So pre-1A, it was I don't really remember that much from pre-1A, but first grade and on, I remember very well. Manas Mendel has a son that actually lives around the corner from me. So he was the Menal of Yeshiva Brooklyn then. One day I was in first grade, and I still remember to this day who my Rebbe was, and one day the Menal Rebbe Mendel called up my mother. I unfortunately ended up in the hospital, so I didn't really have that much learning that I was able to do. So the Menal called up my mother and said, I don't know what it's called. I think it's I forgot the name of it, but they put me in the classroom while I was on the phone in the hospital so I could learn.
Well, today they have like telehealth, something similar.
Something similar, but it wasn't telehealth. It wasn't like that. It was basically over the mic, over the microphone system.
So a Rebbe had like a mic next to him, and then you saw him.
No, I didn't see him.
You couldn't see him.
I was on the phone.
Okay, this is a long time ago. It wasn't so easy to have.
Yeah.
But you were on the phone, and the class was able to hear you.
Yeah.
Interesting. And so that's actually that's pretty amazing for someone, this is at least, how many years ago is this? 20 some odd years ago?
20 some odd years ago. I don't know exactly how many years ago.
It's pretty progressive for someone so long ago to be able to understand the need for this.
Right.
And you were sitting in your hospital bed listening to class.
I was listening to class. I was doing the best I could with whatever was going on with me in the hospital. The Menal actually the Menal back then, he has a son who I'm very, very, very good friends with. His name is Chaim. And since pre-1A, actually, we've been best friends. And he and I learned together for many, many years over the phone every night. And when I wasn't in yeshiva or whatever, he would bring home my homework and stuff like that. So I have very, very extremely great appreciation to him and to his family, especially to the Holmandel family. They took a chance on a kid with a disease. They brought him into the yeshiva,
and just to be clear, it's an unknown disease. They didn't know.
Right. No one knew exactly what it was. I mean, at that point they did, but it
wasn't common.
It wasn't common. Correct. It wasn't common. So it was, yeah. So his grandson brought home all the work. A lot of times I was able to go to yeshiva in the morning, but unfortunately with FD, you can get sick at any point in time of day. So I would get sick and start not feeling well, and
I guess the secretary would call your mother, and then it would be.
So I would go to the secretary. I would go to the office and call either my mother or father. Back then, we also, don't forget, the cell phones were also not that common back in the day because there was not that many cell phones, and if you had a cell phone, you were very, very rich.
So your parents weren't necessarily reachable.
Right. So my father worked in wherever, and my mother was home with her other kids. So it was very hard, but she always made the trip out to Flatbush, to Yeshiva Brooklyn to pick me up.
Does your mother drive?
My mother does not drive, so she either walked or either took a train or taxi, whatever it was.
How far is IB from your house? Just
it's about 15, 20 minutes. It's not far. Mm-hmm. I live in Kensington, and Yeshiva Brooklyn is on Avenue L and Ocean Parkway.
And so your mother basically had to be available throughout the day. Your father was at work, so your mother, if she wanted to work, she couldn't because she had to.
Right, she had to be home for me.
So an average year, how many times were you out? Not how long you were out. How many times were you out?
How
many times would you have to call to take you home?
It could have been every day of the week. It could have been 2, 3, 4, depending on the time. Depending on back then, there was no real advancements in medication and all that stuff. So it was much easier I don't want to say much easier, but it was much easier to get sick than to stay healthy.
What does it look like when you say you're getting sick? So you mentioned pneumonia earlier, but I'm assuming you didn't get pneumonia every day. So what does it mean to get sick?
So getting sick means I start feeling nauseous. I start getting red in my face. I start getting blotchy, and I have something called crisis. Now, if anyone has ever seen a crisis, you know exactly what it is. Basically, you cannot throw up any food because when you're diagnosed with FD, they do a surgery called a stomach wrap. Now, what's a stomach wrap? They wrap your stomach like a pillow, basically, so that you can only throw up, not even throw up, you can retch saliva. So
why do you, so just to be clear, why do you have to throw up? Is this something that you become nauseous and you have to throw up?
When you're nauseous, you want to throw up, right?
So when you say a crisis, the crisis is basically they become nauseous and then you have to throw up, but you can't.
Correct. You want to throw up, but you can't because you have the stomach wrap. So you only retch saliva.
Okay. And the outcome of that, what happens afterwards? So
it really depends on if you catch. Right now, if you catch it early enough, it can go away within a couple of hours. But if you don't catch it right away,
when you say catching it right away, you mean there's some kind of medication now that mitigates the issue?
So there have been medication. It's called whatever from day one, but it helps lower the blood pressure and heart rate.
And that makes it less nauseous?
Sometimes, yeah.
So when
But
it's
sometimes you need more than one dose.
so if it's effective, the point is that ultimately you're not nauseous anymore, and then you don't have to retch, and then you feel better.
Right. You go to sleep and you
So this can sometimes come on like the onset. There's no indication that's going to happen. It just happens.
correct.
So let's jump back into the school. How were the
Okay.
kids in class? Let's say in first grade, second grade. What were they like? Do you remember?
So it was really a regular yeshiva, and the kids were most of them, 95% of the kids were very, very nice. They obviously knew that something was up with me because I missed a lot, but they were all very nice to me, and especially Chaim Mendel. Chaim Mendel was very, very nice. And
he's the superhero. He's a superhero of the story. There was a villain, a superhero. He's a superhero.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, fine. So now let's move on to I guess older grades. I mean, did you know throughout as you're growing up that you were different, that you had different types of challenges, or you didn't think of yourself that way?
I knew I had different challenges because I didn't go to school every day. I wasn't able to go to school every day because I wasn't feeling well. So I did know I was different to a certain degree, because kids also, regular normal kids leave, don't come to school also
Every day, right? These
every
other,
day.
There's
other issues,
yeah,
right?
Okay.
But I did know that I was different. Did I feel like I was being treated different in Yeshiva of Brooklyn? No, I was not treated any different. I didn't feel like it. It could be I was, but I didn't feel like I was being treated any differently.
You mentioned earlier that the yeshiva would accommodate you by making that phone system, and that Chaim would bring the homework. And did this extend throughout the years, or just in first and second grade?
Throughout all the years of elementary school, he would come bring me home my homework or whatever. We would learn on the phone, literally until.
Did you keep up? With the classwork?
I did not keep up with class. I couldn't keep up with, especially English. English was a very, very hard part of the day because I was, a lot of the times it happened during the afternoon period.
Hours, right.
So I didn't really keep up. I did have, later on in the years, growing up, I did do homeschool.
Homeschool just in the afternoon, you mean?
Just in the afternoon, because to teach me more science, spelling, math. It happens to be I was very, very good at one point in my life with spelling, even though I missed a lot, but when I was there, I did amazing at spelling. Now I can't say the same.
Well, sometimes it runs in the family. Sometimes, it's just something you pick up.
Right.
Okay, so now, if you can, let's talk a bit about the summers. So I know that Chai Lifeline is a big part of your life, and I know it's because of Camp Simcha. So what was your introduction to Camp Simcha? How did it start? How old were you? What was it like?
Great question. So I don't want to be a Balgaiva right now, but my pediatrician was Dr. Stuart Dietrich. And Dr. Dietrich, I was in his office one day, and I don't know exactly who was there with me, either both my parents or just my mother. I don't remember exactly. He said, I'm opening up a camp for special needs kids, and I would like for you to send your kid to camp. My mother, not unfortunately, but she said, absolutely not. However, my father's like, absolutely. Take him for however long you want.
Yeah, it sounds like your father took care of you more than your mother. And maybe he was just sick and tired of you.
He was sick and tired of me. So that was when I was. That was when I was 6.5 years old. So so I started Camp Simcha. I mean, I was the first applicant and first acceptantee into Camp Simcha Special in 2001 when I was 6.5 years old.
And just to be clear, Camp Simcha Special is what exactly?
So Camp Simcha Special is a camp for people with chronic illnesses like such as FD, CP, MD.
As opposed to
Camp Simcha regular is for kids with cancer. You want it?
I hear. Yeah. Okay, so the special part means it's everything other than that. Okay,
right. So it happens to be Camp Simcha regular started before Camp Simcha special. I was talking to the CEO of Chai Lifeline, Rabbi Simcha Scholar.
You had him on a couple of weeks ago, yeah.
Right, and he said something funny, that Camp Simcha regular should have been named Camp Simcha special, and Camp Simcha special should have been called Camp Simcha regular. Why? Because Camp Simcha regular kids, meaning kids with cancer, you treat them like special kids, and Camp Simcha regular, meaning Camp Simcha special, should have been called regular because you should treat kids with special needs regular. But that's just how it worked out. It just worked out because Camp Simcha regular started before Camp Simcha special, and they had everything ready, so they just added the word special to Camp Simcha.
So your bragging rights is that you were in year number 1.
I was there in year number 1.
And you were the guinea pig that started out Camp Simcha special.
Not only the guinea pig, they had such hard times the first year finding counselors and staff for Camp Simcha special because no one knew what they were getting themselves into in Camp Simcha or Chai Lifeline. They had no idea what they were getting themselves into. It was very, very hard. They only had camp for 1 week, so 7 days from Sunday to Sunday. And I actually have to tell you something because right before Camp Simcha special started, the dining room burnt down. Okay, fine. So we all ate in the gym. Every meal. However, me with FD, I was sick the entire week.
That's the first week that they're starting out with?
It was the entire first week. Now, it was 1 week that year. So I missed everything. Friday night came. I woke up and I told my counselors, I want to go to the Friday night meal.
In the gym.
And lo and behold, they took me, I guess, in a wheelchair. I don't remember exactly what they did. They took me and I sat with Dr. Dietrich on his table. And we had a gorgeous Friday night meal, and I think I got sick right after the meal.
But you got that one little taste of Chai Lifeline special. Sorry, Camp Simcha special that first year. Listen, you're bragging rights, and you do have a right to be Balgaiva, and you have other things to brag about, but this is definitely one of those. Okay, so let's move on. So that was Camp Simcha, and as time went on, it became more and more of an official.
It's definitely more of an official camp nowadays. Now it's between 10 and 14 days per session.
How many years did you go?
So I went from 6.5 till I was 18 years old, with 1 gap year in between. But later on, I'll speak about that gap year.
All right. So you basically were there for quite a while. That's you watched it grow up to an extent.
I grew up in Camp Simcha special. I that's my home away from home. I grew up in Camp Simcha special.
How many years before Camp Simcha special had its first year did Camp Simcha exist?
Camp Simcha has existed since in the 1980s or something, but it was very small. It was not like what it is nowadays. It was very small. They didn't even have this big, massive campus that they're on right now. But when you got there, they already had this campus? So they had this campus. They bought it maybe 5-6 years before that. But then the dining room burned. And it was old. It was decrepit. It was old bunkhouses. The first year, they didn't even have air conditioning in the bunkhouses.
It's hard to imagine, but that's how we all grew up.
It was not normal. The maintenance guy, his name is Benzie Brown. he was running around. I think it was the first year, looking for air conditioners for the bunkhouses for Camp Simcha Special. No, and like I literally said, no one had any clue what they were getting themselves into.
Mm-hmm. And now, just comparing Simcha Special, now they probably have everything.
They have the biggest infirmary in upstate New York. They have the most massive grounds, the most beautiful bunkhouses in the world. It's just absolutely amazing. Every year they do something very nice for the kids, something new. Last year they did a whole new outdoor thing. This year I don't think they did anything major, but they redid some things.
Now they're busy with the rain, so I don't know what they're doing these days.
Yeah, wow.
It's been a weird.
Look at that rain last night.
It's been a weird week. Okay, so moving on. So let's discuss Yehuda at, I don't know, 6th or 7th grade. So what was that like? So at that point, I'm assuming you sort of came to terms with the differences you had.
Right.
At this point, you're probably, I don't know, 11 or 12 years old.
I was 12 years old in 6th grade.
Okay. And Chaim and Della still a friend of yours?
We were still best friends. We still learned every night, and yeah.
And what was different? I mean, what would you say is different?
In
terms of your life, in terms of your general day, when you were in 1st grade to when you were
major difference. I was getting much healthier to an extent that I was able to stay most of the day for Hebrew and for English also in 6th grade, 7th grade.
Mm-hmm. And this is because you're better able to manage your crises, or just because you were healthier in general? You were eating better?
We started to be able to manage my crisis much better, but I grew up and I was growing up. I was 12 years old in 6th grade. A 12-year-old with FD back in the day was not unheard of, but it was quite impressive, and each day I was getting better and better.
Could you describe something you did differently in terms of your regular schedule? I
just had lots of therapy, lots of feeding therapy, oh, by the way, I forgot to mention, I didn't start eating really good big foods until I was in 5th grade. What happened was, in 5th grade, I started having something called seizures. It's seizures, and one of the doctors that we went to put me on a medication, and they didn't warn us that it's basically you get starving and you start eating a lot.
Okay.
So
the side effects is that you're hungry.
Side effects, yeah, it makes you hungry. So I was dealing with seizures also from 5th grade through the beginning of high school. But what happened was that, so I started eating a lot and a lot and a lot and a lot, and it made me sick because I couldn't stop eating. I was eating and couldn't stop eating.
At this point, you were eating through a feeding tube?
I was eating by mouth.
Eating by mouth?
Yeah. I was eating by mouth with my feeding therapist, who came almost every single day. I don't know exactly how many days a week, but she came almost every single day. And I started eating and gaining weight up until finally they decided to put me in the hospital in 5th grade, or was it the beginning of 6th grade? I don't remember. No, I think it was the end of 5th grade that they put me on something called an EKG, and they put me on a certain medication that stopped the seizures, and
that stopped the need for the other medicine that made you hungry, and then you slowed down.
Right. Well, I had other medication in between the one that made me eat a lot.
But What about, so when did you actually start eating full foods?
In 5th grade.
You want to take a small break? I can see you looking at, so it looks like you're looking at a ghost.
I'm good. Sorry.
No problem. If you want to take a break and continue later, we could, by the way.
No, I'm good.
Good? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So that is learning how to eat normally, I guess. And so I wanted to know your day. So your day got better because you eat better. I'm assuming you slept better. You were able to manage.
I was not sleeping.
You were not sleeping.
I was not sleeping better than I was. It was the same.
Same. Okay, but you're definitely more healthier than you were, in nursery and kindergarten, first, second.
Correct. Yeah.
And you had a more fuller day.
Yeah.
All right, so let's continue on to your bar mitzvah.
Okay, so that was in 7th grade, when I was in 7th grade.
What time of the year is your bar mitzvah, by the way? Is it
so my
fall?
So my birthday is right after the summer, after Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. If actually falls, my Hebrew birthday is 4th day Chalmai. My English birthday is October 4th.
Okay.
So the year of my bar mitzvah, the Chalmai Sukkot was a full week. So my parents wanted to make, it was a big Simcha because I'm 13 years old and whatever. So they made it in Rabbi Cohen's Sukkah on Coney Island and Avenue L. It's one of the biggest sukkahs in New York, in Brooklyn, I mean. And so they rented the sukkah, and so what happened was, Chol Hamoed, I was not feeling well and I started getting sick with crisis.
How many days before your mitzvah?
This was the week of my bar mitzvah. Like, it was end of first days. Literally, I got sick like at the end of the first day, second day, whatever. The second day of first day Yantiv. And they didn't know what to do because my bar mitzvah was on Thursday. And I was sick like a dog. Like, I really was sick. So they took me to my doctor, Dr. Tichek, and I think it was pneumonia, but I'm not 100% sure. So he put me on antibiotics, and it still wasn't getting better. I still remember to this day, I was lying in my bed or on my couch. I don't remember where it was, but my sister comes over to me and says it was raining outside. And when it rains,
it gets worse.
You can't have
the sukkah, you mean?
You don't eat in the sukkah, right? Okay. So for plan B, it was in the basement hall of Rabbi Cohen's shul. My sister comes over to me, starts singing, "The sun will come out tomorrow, tomorrow. The sun will come out tomorrow." Anyway, lo and behold, the day of my bar mitzvah, 4th day Chol Hamoed, it was a Thursday. Thursday night was Hoshana Rabbah. The sun came out. It was gorgeous, beautiful day, and I was feeling amazing. Baruch Hashem, thank you Hashem. And everyone was like just like in awe. First of all, because of the rain, and second of all, because I was feeling much better, my bar mitzvah was for the ages, I think. It was still new.
When did you put on tefillin for the first time?
So I put on a month before. My father put.
Either way, it wasn't really
right.
Wow.
So the bar mitzvah, since Kem Simcha was still Kem Simcha special was pretty new back then. It was 06, 07. Everyone came. Like literally the entire Simcha special, all the staff came. Plus my family is big, Kanai, and I have regular friends. Like I have a whole class of friends and family friends. I don't know exactly the number, but I think it was tossed around by between 600 and 800 people that came to the bar mitzvah.
Amazing.
And so originally my father did not want me to say pshato, but I have a brother who learns a lot, Baruch Hashem. He lives in Lakewood, and he wrote me my pshat, and my father practiced with me, practiced, because I had a very hard time speaking back in the day.
Well, you still have a hard time with the...
Yes and no. I'm getting much better, but back in the day, it was very hard. So it just, like, I kept on, whatever, I was practicing. And we have a video of my bar mitzvah. And if you look at it, I totally, I don't want to say killed it, because killing was not a word back then, but
you did a good job.
I did a good job.
If you may say so yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it just was it was a complete, what can I say? I can't say anything more about my bar mitzvah than it was just absolutely amazing. I had Shlomi Dax sing at my bar mitzvah.
I don't know if people know, maybe I don't know who Shlomi Dax is.
Oh, I just had Shlomi Dax.
He became famous again
a couple of months ago.
Shlomi Dax was the guy.
He was the guy.
The guy.
My all-time favorite singer, Shlomi Dax.
Shlomi Dax was the guy. He was the big guy in those days.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay, so let's move on a little bit. So you graduated, I'm assuming, your yeshiva. Hopefully, unless you decided to cut, but you graduated your yeshiva and then you went to high school.
Right.
So let's talk about that. So
okay.
You went to high school, obviously, in 9th grade.
The
last year, hang on 1 second. The last year you were in YOB, you still went to Camp Simcha, right?
Yeah.
All right. So your first introduction to a new group of kids was literally
high school.
First day you walk into class. So you've been to the same kids literally from, I guess you said pre-1A or so, or
right,
kindergarten and pre-1A all the way for roughly 9 years,
right,
10 years, and even in the summer you really hung out with the same other kids, but there wasn't
correct.
That's just a couple of weeks, and then for the first time in your life you're in a different environment, and that's called high school. Well, high school is a rough place. So
back up a little bit.
Okay.
So I graduated. So when I was in 8th grade, it was different, because already when I forgot to mention this, but when I was in 3rd grade, we got a new manal in Yeshiva Brooklyn. His name is Rabbi Aram. Rabbi Zvi Aram or something like that. So he became the new manal in Yeshiva Brooklyn. And so when I was in 8th grade, as all boys do, you start looking for high schools where you want to go to. So I really wanted to go with friends to wherever they were going. Now, however, with FD, being that I have FD and I get sick a lot,
you couldn't go out of...
I couldn't go out of town. My number one choice was Darche, but I couldn't go there because it was too far. My second choice was Tertumima. That was a little far. The third choice, which was not my number one choice, not my number one and number two, I went there. I did not go with anyone.
So just before, hang on. So the boys in your class went mostly where? Like a guy like Chaim Mendel, where did he go?
Chaim Mendel went to Peekskill.
Peekskill in 9th grade?
Yeah.
Okay, but most of the boys went to peace, and they went so far.
No, they all went to other places. One went to Chavetz Chaim, one went to, I don't know,
The YOB
Tartuna.
themselves had their own high school? I guess not.
So they used to have their own high school. It was run by my cousin, actually, for many years. But by then, he already moved to Lakewood, and there was no more high school anyway.
So I'm just wondering, how many kids did you have in your class in YOB?
We had, I want to say, about 30.
And they scattered all over the place.
Yeah.
So you went to this new school for the first time. And so let's describe that.
So I went to a new school for high school, and with no one. I didn't go with anyone. The first day of high school, I see a kid that looks similar to what Chaim Mendel was. Okay, I say, hello, how are you? My father was with me. Okay, whatever. That was that. I went from 30 kids to, I want to say 13 in my class in 9th grade.
Wow, it was a small school, okay.
It was not a small school. It was considered the base share.
So the grade itself was pretty big. It just had a smaller base share.
Correct.
And you were in the base share because you sort of had
I'm not really sure why I was put into the base share. It could be because I was far behind, or I wasn't such a good learner. I learned, but I wasn't like one of the top boys in my class. So yeah, I was put into the base share for a reason, whether it's because I wasn't feeling well and I was far behind, or I just wasn't a big learner. So I was put into the base share. And I think there was 13 kids, if I'm not mistaken. And the Olive share had about, I don't know, 25 kids, 25, so about 40 kids.
About 40, 45 in the grade.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So this kid that looks like Chaim, who's he?
He's some random kid that I just saw in high school. I don't know his name.
You had some familiarity, so you felt a little, you felt comfortable in a weird way.
Right. Yeah.
Like you had mom's kiddush with you, you had like something to hold on to.
Right. And yeah, I thought I did. I thought I had someone that I could hold on to. And
how were your Rebbeim there? Did they deal with your issues, or they
so
stood away?
The Rebbeim, so my 9th grade Rebbe was already pretty much at the end of his career at the yeshiva. So he didn't really do anything. My Bekiyas Rebbe was new to the yeshiva. I think he only lasted there a couple of years. So he also didn't really take any initiative in helping me or doing anything like that.
Hang on. At this point, you were mostly still in yeshiva, or you went back to the good old days where you're in the hospital half the time?
So for the most part, I was in yeshiva. Once or twice, I ended up in the hospital, but for the most part, I was in.
Forget about the hospital. I'm talking about, say, like crisis.
Oh, crisis! Yeah, crisis was all this. It was pretty much the same. Not as bad, but it was still there. It's still going to be there till Mitzvah Hashem Ad Mei V'Esrim, but
that's just part of life. But the question is, so in YOB, you said he had his telehealth, sort of, whatever that was, that contraption that helped you sort of keep up when you weren't there. Did they do something similar to that in his other high school?
So the high school did not do anything. They didn't do anything. First of all, the principal was at the end of his life also in the yeshiva.
Oh, wow. He came out a bad year. Okay.
And no, he stayed through most of my high school years, but right after I left, he retired from the yeshiva. He left from the yeshiva. So he also was not that involved in helping the situation.
How are the boys in the class?
They were not your best boys, and they didn't help. The situation didn't help itself. And
so you didn't have like a one kid that you were able to lean on.
no, I did not have any kid to lean on. First of all, that's first of all. Second of all, none of the kids in my class lived in my neighborhood. Wherever the yeshiva was, they didn't live in the neighborhood at all. So
There's no like out of class.
No, nothing did anything.
So that you couldn't, they didn't help you with it. Did they stop you? Did they give you a hard time?
You talking about the yeshiva or the boys?
Well, let's, I guess, talk about the yeshiva first. So the yeshiva, you said, didn't really help you.
Right.
Did they just let you do your thing? Or let's say, for example, if you had to go to a doctor's appointment, did they give you like, you should do it during Beinas Darim, or did they? They
didn't give me a hard time. They knew somewhat of the situation because the Menal actually we know the Menal's brother very well, so the family. So he knew sort of the situation. But
did your mother tell him before of what's?
I'm assuming they had a discussion beforehand. Also, I did not go to English in high school. I was doing homeschool.
And that was, I'm assuming that was
for English. I'm talking about.
Right, but that was discussed before. I'm sure.
Yeah, that was discussed.
So they knew something was up, and they did.
Right.
So did they give you a hard time? Let's say you had to go to a doctor's appointment 12:00 in the afternoon. Did you have like pushback?
They didn't, because at that point the Rebbeim or Benalim didn't. They turned their eye, if you want to say it like that.
Mm-hmm. All right, so now let's talk about the kids in the class. The kids in the class, you didn't have anyone like particular who you were close with, like you had in school. None of the kids lived in your neighborhood.
Right.
The kids themselves were, as you said, the base share, which means that they weren't necessarily the best kids, academically or socially, or what? Both,
actually, academically and socially.
So like, what was that like?
It was hard. It was really hard because I was trying to fit in the whole year in 9th grade, and I wanted to show that I am capable of being in the Aleph share, but they didn't really let me do that, the kids in the class. Also, a couple from the Aleph share also, but mainly from the base share. They didn't really help. They didn't really help the situation, and they took me for a run for my money.
Mm-hmm. So, do you want to elaborate on that? I mean, it took you.
So yeah, I'm going to elaborate. So when I mean they took me for a run for my money, they bullied me, and I remember vaguely. Not vague. I remember distinctly. I was home one night. This was in 9th grade. I remember getting 3 texts in a row from someone from the Aleph share. 3 nasty, nasty texts.